This was going to be a closely watched trip from start to finish, the first international trip for Pope Leo XIV. And as soon as he landed in Ankara, the capital of Turkey, the spotlight was on. His arrival in Turkey was official. A guard of honour, a red carpet and an escort towards the presidential palace. But Turkey, being a Muslim-majority country with only 0.05% of the population Christian, the first thing that strikes you is the lack of crowds to welcome the Holy Father. In fact, there were no people lining the roads, no banners, no fanfare. And we asked people on the street what they thought of the papal visit, and there was a mixed response.
I look at it positively. There is no problem with a religious leader coming to our country. I'm a peaceful person and I respect everyone.
If our nation's founder Ataturk didn't look on this kind of thing positively, and if the sultans weren't in favor either, then we, even if we don't know everything, must all see this as something that is not good.
At the presidential palace, traditional and religious Turkish music was performed by the military band. And inside, the Pope met with President Erdogan and other state authorities before delivering his first major address of the trip.
In a society like the one here in Turkey, where religion plays a visible role, it is essential to honor the dignity and freedom of all God's children. And this has personal, social, and political implications.
He urged respect for human dignity and freedom and praised the importance put on family life in Turkish society. And afterwards, he visited the National Library of Turkey, where, speaking again to more diplomats and officials, he stressed that Christians are part of the Turkish identity and they must feel like they belong to it. By the following day, the Pope had arrived in Istanbul, where outside the Cathedral of the Holy Spirit, Catholics had gathered to catch a glimpse of the Holy Father. Some from Turkey, but many immigrants now living here, and other faithful who had travelled from neighbouring countries. Inside the cathedral, clergy, religious and lay faithful packed the pews, praying with the Holy Father. Remember, there are 85 million people in Turkey, and of them, only around 33,000 are Catholic.
It is a great joy for me to be with you.
And in his speech, Pope Leo encouraged them to see their small numbers not as a weakness, but as a strength, and never lose hope. He also said one of the areas in which he saw hope in Turkey were the young people.
Among the most beautiful and promising signs, I think of the many young people who come knocking at the doors of the Catholic Church with their questions and concerns. In this regard, I urge you to continue the good pastoral work that you are doing.
After visiting a care home for the elderly run by the Little Sisters of the Poor and spending time greeting the residents one by one, Pope Leo boarded a helicopter for a 30-minute flight to the ancient town of Iznik and the site of the Council of Nicaea 1700 years ago. As he arrived, the Muslim call to prayer echoed from a nearby mosque, and on the lakeshore, the Pope had the most important meeting of his entire trip to Turkey. Standing with the ecumenical patriarch Bartholomew, who is seen as the spiritual leader for all Eastern churches, Pope Leo spoke about the divisions among Christians.
We are all invited to overcome the scandal of the divisions that unfortunately still exist, and to nurture the desire for unity for which the Lord Jesus prayed and gave his life.
He also said that what was at stake at Nicaea 1700 years ago was at stake today. That is the belief in Jesus Christ as the real God, and not just, as he put it,
charismatic leader or Superman, a misrepresentation that ultimately leads to sadness and confusion.
We believe in one God.
Then Pope Leo, with the ecumenical patriarch Bartholomew, recited the creed together.
Eternally begotten of the Father.
The following day, Pope Leo focused on two big themes: respect for non-Christian religions like Islam and unity among Christians. Visiting the Sultan Ahmed Mosque, better known as the Blue Mosque, he stepped inside, removed his shoes, and walked in his white socks across the vast carpet. But unlike his predecessors Benedict XVI and Francis, Pope Leo chose not to pause in visible prayer. And later, a spokesperson for the mosque, speaking to journalists, said that he had invited Pope Leo to worship, but the Pope had politely declined, saying he was there to visit. The day concluded at Istanbul's Volkswagen Arena, where Pope Leo celebrated the only public mass of his trip to Turkey, and the first time in Turkey's history that a papal mass has been held outside of a church building. Around 4,000 people were packed into the arena, shouting "Viva el Papa" as he entered. And in his homily, Pope Leo called out once again for peace and harmony.
How great the need for peace, unity, and reconciliation around us, within us, and among us. What can our contribution be in response?
On Pope Leo's final day in Turkey, he visited the Armenian Apostolic Cathedral, and in a country that still struggles with its past, the Pope made a carefully but unmistakable acknowledgement of the Armenian people's suffering.
This visit provides me with the opportunity to thank God for the courageous Christian witness of the Armenian people throughout history, often amid tragic circumstances.
From there, he returned to the Church of St. George, another strong sign of his push for Christian unity. And speaking inside the small church, he talked about
blood-stained conflict and violence,
and said it was the duty of different Christian churches, despite their differences, to work together for peace. And with the message of peace having been repeated again and again throughout his visit, his time in Turkey had come to an end. And he departed Istanbul International Airport for Lebanon. And on board, during his first in-flight press conference as Pope, Leo spoke openly about some of the biggest crises in the world today, including the war in Gaza.
La Santa Sede già da diversi anni pubblicamente appoggia la proposta di una soluzione di due stati. Sappiamo tutti che in questo momento ancora Israele non accetta quella soluzione, ma lo vediamo come l'unica soluzione che potrebbe offrire una soluzione al conflitto che continuamente vivono.
And just after 3:45 p.m. local time, Pope Leo touched down in Beirut and was greeted on the red carpet by the President and Prime Minister of Lebanon. Church bells rang across the capital as his motorcade headed towards the presidential palace. And despite the heavy rain, crowds waved Lebanese and Vatican flags. Families with children, elderly people, and even Hezbollah-affiliated scouts lined the route. It was a strong welcome to a country with a Christian population estimated to be around 40%. At the Babda Palace, under tight security, Pope Leo delivered his first major speech on Lebanese soil to a hall filled with political leaders and representatives of Lebanon's many religious communities. He began with the words of Jesus.
Blessed are the peacemakers.
He acknowledged what he called a highly complex and uncertain regional situation, With daily Israeli attacks, the risk of another war on the southern border, a crippling economic collapse, and the presence of more than 1 million refugees. But he praised the resilience of the Lebanese people.
You are a people who do not give up, but in the face of trials, you always know how to rise again with courage.
Pope Leo urged leaders to put the common good above everything else and encourage the people to heal.
Wounds that take many years, sometimes entire generations, to heal. If they are not treated, if we do not work, for example, to heal memories, to bring together those who have suffered wrongs and injustice, it is difficult to journey towards peace. We would remain stuck, each imprisoned by our own pain and our own way of thinking.
The following morning, high in the misty mountains of Anaya, once again the faithful braved the rain outside the monastery of St. Moran. They had come from across Lebanon, Syria and Iraq, hoping to witness a moment never before seen in a country's history, a pope praying at the tomb of St. Charbel. Inside the small stone grotto, a choir sang a hymn in Arabic and Syriac, and then the Holy Father knelt in silence. Afterwards, speaking in French, Pope Leo entrusted Lebanon to Saint Charbel's intercession, saying,
Nous demandons la paix. Nous l'implorons tout particulièrement pour le Liban et pour tout le Levant. Mais nous savons bien, et les saints nous le rappellent, qu'il n'y a pas de paix sans conversion des cœurs.
From there, the Pope travelled down the road to the shrine of Our Lady of Lebanon, overlooking the Mediterranean. And when he stepped inside the vast basilica, 2,700 bishops, priests, religious sisters, and pastoral workers erupted into applause. It was an emotional meeting where religious shared their testimonies of living through last year's war.
Chers frères dans l'épiscopat,
Pope Leo praised their courage and quoted Pope Benedict XVI from his trip to Lebanon in 2012.
c'est justement maintenant qu'il faut célébrer la victoire de la mort sur la haine, celle du pardon sur la vengeance, celle du service sur la domination, celle de l'humilité sur l'orgueil, celle de l'unité sur la division. Savoir convertir nos souffrances en cris d'amour envers Dieu et de miséricorde envers le prochain.
Pope Leo presented the shrine with a golden rose, a rare papal honour and the first ever bestowed on Our Lady of Lebanon. Later in the afternoon, the Pope travelled to Martyrs Square in central Beirut for an ecumenical and interreligious gathering held in a marquee that was set between the Mohammed Al-Amin Mosque and the Maronite Cathedral of St. George. It was a powerful symbol of Lebanon's identity, with Muslim and Christian leaders standing side by side. There were verses from the Quran recited and readings from the Gospel. But the most joyful and emotional moment of the day was yet to come. As evening fell, Pope Leo travelled to the seat of the Maronite Patriarchate, where more than 15,000 young people had packed the hillside square. Some had even walked for miles to get there.
It's also a big blessing to be among the first countries here that the Pope is visiting.
It restores my faith actually and gives me more hope towards a better future and a more peaceful future actually.
Taking to the stage, Pope Leo first greeted them in Arabic.
Peace be with you.
He listened to the testimonies from the young people, stories of unemployment, of war, of shattered dreams, and of the temptation to emigrate. Then he delivered a powerful message to the young people, telling them that there was hope, that the hope could be found within each one of them.
You have hope, you have time, you have more time to dream, to plan, and to do good. You are the present, and the future is already taking shape in your hands. You have the enthusiasm to change the course of history.
The following morning, in contrast with the roar of the young people, Pope Leo XIV stood in silence. Under a grey morning sky, the Pope stood beside the ruined grain silos, still scarred from the 2020 port blast, where 220 people were killed and thousands more injured. He stood and bowed his head in prayer. And behind him, survivors and heartbroken families held photos of mothers, fathers and children, still grieving and still waiting for justice. And when he greeted them one by one, many cried openly. From there, the Pope travelled to the Della Croia Hospital, a Catholic-run psychiatric facility in the city's northern suburbs. Children dressed as Swiss Guard stood outside, and patients and staff lined the balconies to welcome him. Inside the small chapel, Pope Leo spoke to the patients and those who are suffering.
Chers frères et sœurs qui êtes marqués par la maladie, je voudrais seulement vous rappeler que vous êtes dans le cœur de Dieu notre Père.
And he also had a message for the sisters who care for them.
Merci, chères sœurs, pour la mission que vous accomplissez avec joie et dévouement.
And finally, at Beirut's waterfront, a sea of Lebanese and Vatican flags waved in the wind as an estimated 150,000 people gathered for an open-air mass. Stepping from the Pope Mobile to thunderous applause, the Pope delivered one of his strongest appeals of his time in Lebanon. He was speaking to a crowd that had suffered, where many had fled violence in the south or lost their homes in the economic collapse. And with that, his first international trip, a 6-day mission of peace stretching from Turkey to Lebanon, came to an end. At Beirut's international airport, Pope Leo climbed the stairs of his ITA Airways flight. He turned at the top and he waved goodbye to Lebanon. Reporting from Ankara, Istanbul and Beirut, Colm Flynn for EWTN News in Depth.